They've really had enough. In the same district, debris fell near a gas station. The fire there is being extinguished. Ivan Timoshko, a military expert, is joining the conversation. Can you hear us, Mr. Ivan?
I can see you well.
We regularly talk with you. So what do we see in the change of the enemy's behavior? It seems to me that now is exactly the time to ask, so what do we see? We see 1,300 Shaheeds. Monitors have counted this. This is still unofficial statistics. We are definitely waiting for the official numbers. Up to 50 missiles, besides the capital, Kremlin'S, Kharkiv and Odessa region are also under attack. What should we understand?
You see, the strategic process of gradually accumulating and building up, in fact, various means of mass destruction by the enemy took place during this regrouping of military forces over these past few days. And yes, there are many people who might argue and say that this was a ceasefire, but I never called it that. I said that I called it essentially nothing more than a temporary lull and a significant regrouping of enemy forces. As we can see, the process of accumulating Shaheeds, which they were preparing to launch during those days, they stockpiled just as they did with missiles and decided to use all their available launchers to the fullest in order to carry out this strike. Unfortunately, my sincere condolences to those who were killed and to the families who lost their loved ones. However, it is crucial for us to fully understand that this specific ammunition that hit today was originally supposed to arrive at least several days earlier than it actually did. That is simply the way the current situation has unfolded, because any airstrikes are meticulously planned well in advance of the actual execution, so to speak, sometimes even several weeks ahead of time and sometimes just a few days. So this period when the enemy was not launching strikes and was stockpiling weapons was simply delayed in time, unfortunately, but it did not mean that the enemy had abandoned its intention to carry out aggression and genocide against the Ukrainian people. We are indeed witnessing terrible, one could say, destruction of a residential building, which the enemy deliberately targeted. What can we actually say now, evaluating this missile strike? Well, it also involved drones, and in fact it lasted for more than a day. So this number of drones was not a single launch or a single missile, but rather occurred over a period of time. We can say that the enemy is trying to use everything they have to the fullest, to the maximum. And by and large, we understand that the enemy would like to significantly increase the volume of launches and do so in a shorter period of time, but they lack the launchers, the necessary equipment, the aircraft, and even the ships to be able to carry out such massive strikes on a constant basis. That's good, but it's not good that the enemy has the ability to do this at all. Broadly speaking, and looking at the bigger picture, we also have to carefully consider and take into serious account here that the enemy's results and the massive volume in which they launch their attacks are completely and utterly disproportionate to one another, and our air defense systems, as well as other dedicated armed forces units, are working tirelessly and doing everything humanly possible to effectively counteract this threat. This always needs to be emphasized, because the enemy wants destruction on a scale many, many times greater. Unfortunately, it is not always within the realm of possibility to effectively counter every single massive enemy strike. On the other hand, we clearly see that the enemy remains firmly convinced that by striking directly at the innocent civilian population, they can somehow provoke widespread uprisings within Ukraine and force the sovereign Ukrainian leadership under intense public pressure to agree to those humiliating and unconditional demands for total capitulation that, in essence, they are aggressively trying to impose on us. Therefore, we will have to keep fighting, standing our ground, and resisting the enemy. And the best way to do this is to destroy their launchers, their aircraft, and their ammunition depots on their own territory. And a lot of effort is being put into this as well, because in reality we are not only defending ourselves, but we are also striking enemy targets.
Let's talk about that. Let's add some useful information, at least as it is presented by the journalists of the Financial Times. The Russian military command, of course, has convinced Putin that Russia can and will capture the Donbass by this autumn. The Financial Times refers to two sources who have been in contact with the Russian leader. And also the assessment of Ukrainian intelligence, or more precisely data from Ukrainian intelligence. If they succeed in Donetsk region, Moscow may put forward new territorial claims, and here we are talking about Zaporizhzhia and Kherson regions. The publication's interlocutors believe that Putin's real ambitions are likely much greater, since the Kremlin wants to establish control over a larger part of the country, including the Dnipro, Kyiv, and Odessa. And at the same time, we can understand that the armed forces of Ukraine are achieving successes on one of the hottest sections of the front. This is the Oleksandrivsky sector. There, the enemy is conducting assaults using a new tactic. This is a statement from the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, Oleksandr Syrsky. After another trip to the combat zone where he met with the command, he said the following, quote follows.
Although large-scale attacks with heavy equipment are a thing of the past, the enemy is actively using UAVs, artillery and small infantry groups. In turn, the defense forces of Ukraine are employing active defense tactics when possible and appropriate, advancing and achieving certain successes. Oleksandr Syrsky, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine.
The Air Force is reporting right now that there is a drone over the city, over Kyiv, over the capital, heading towards Brovary. Be mindful, take care of yourselves as much as you can. You definitely know best how to do that wherever you are right now. Mr. Ivan, how should we piece this puzzle together? On one hand, Zaporizhzhia, we have evidence that we are seeing successes in the south. On the other hand, the Russian military leadership is convinced that they have the claim and ambition to seize Donbass. Everything else in the Financial Times report, forgive me, but we didn't read or see anything new there. Yes, Putin wants to capture all of Ukraine. Yes, Putin wants us not to exist. Nothing new.
Of course, there is nothing new since all the old plans and intentions that Putin had even before the full-scale invasion have not been realized. And if we take a moment to discuss his command making various promises to him, well, in reality, it is not so much about genuine strategic military prospects or long-term capabilities, but rather it is about simply buying more time and delaying the inevitable resignations of those specific military officials on the ground who are currently carrying out Putin's direct orders and attempting to occupy the territory of Ukraine. Such empty promises are usually made when the Russian military command structures on the ground feel that they might be summarily dismissed from their current leadership positions, or even face severe imprisonment, or if there are complex internal conflicts and political intrigues among them. One specific part of the command, in order to remove, let's say, their, well, the word friends or partners doesn't really fit here, their fellow high-ranking officers, to push them out of higher positions, promises some kind of immediate tactical success through brutal and relentless meat-grinder-style frontal assaults or other forms of maximum involvement of Russian troops, all to secure a long-term career for themselves or to get much more comfortable positions in the near future. Because to talk about some kind of unique enemy strategy or a new enemy approach to warfare or the emergence of some unique types of weaponry that would give Russia the opportunity to claim technological superiority or, let's say, a significant enough advantage on the battlefield to allow them to plan, organize, and conduct military operations at the operational or strategic level on the ground, well, as of today, they don't have that, although they strive for it and are trying to achieve it. Yes, I understand. Someone might argue with me that they are advancing. Yes, they have been advancing since 2022 already, but the results of their offensives definitely do not match, and I would even say not even 10% match their actual intentions, the ones they outlined and planned starting from 2022 and in the end, the offensive of 2026, which was planned for the beginning, the end of winter, the beginning of spring. We know that in those plans, on that scale, and with those intentions, they have completely failed. Moreover, at the moment they tried to launch or intensify their offensive at the beginning of spring, it ended in failure for them in the Huliaipol direction in Oleksandrivsk, and even there they had to retreat from a number of towns. Our counterattacks took place. Yes, in fact, we can now talk about any direction. Their claims to occupy Kostiantynivka at the beginning of spring, or even their plans last year to take it under control, also did not come true. The Pokrovsk-Mirnohrad agglomeration, the fighting continues. And yes, any direction that we can, the hottest one we can assess, essentially the front line remains unchanged, although their intentions were much, much greater.
We have to understand that to reach the desired or established KPI target, which was announced by Defense Minister Fedorov, the destruction of 50,000 Russian occupiers per month, there is still a lag of 15,000. But obviously there needs to be a way to destroy them on a larger scale. Do you see such a possibility directly in practical implementation? Does it have to be something additional? Or are we simply saying that we need to destroy more of them? Well, so to speak, increase the intensity of the strikes? Or do we need to destroy them still on the territory of, pardon me, Russia? How? Because you have to get those 15,000 from somewhere.
It's a comprehensive approach. First of all, it's not just about destroying them. It's important to make sure that the enemy, their civilians, current civilians, have no desire to go serve in the Russian army. Therefore, in addition to destroying their troops on the battlefield, it's very important to make sure that the Russian population understands that the war has come to them because of them. This is very significant. And these strikes on the oil refining industries, on metallurgy, chemicals, the agricultural sector, on all those industries that are responsible for conducting military operations in Ukraine. Yes, quite often these are non-core agencies or enterprises, but nevertheless they are involved in Russia's military-industrial complex. So, when we talk about 35,000 enemy troops eliminated, even now we are referring to confirmed cases, those who have died or those who have left the battlefield, deserted, or did not make it to the battlefield at all, Russian soldiers. Actually, the real number is much higher than 35, because it's not always possible to record how many were eliminated during a single concentration, how many died from hypothermia, poisoning, internal conflicts, and so on. It's difficult for us, since these are figures that only Russia can record, but we understand that they won't do it. And another point we often overlook is that every Russian enterprise working for the military-industrial complex, oil refining, or any other sector that comes under attack, specialists die there as well. Engineers and technologists who work for the Russian war effort die there as well. And this is important too. We have repeatedly observed an outflow of workers from such enterprises, even from those that are still operating and have not been in the strike zone. This is about reducing their efficiency. This is about diminishing their capabilities. It prevents the enemy from accumulating both material resources in the rear and manpower on the battlefield. This is something that accompanies those 35,000. But it is certainly every bit as important and meaningful. Of course, the process of steadily increasing the destruction of enemy troops, reaching levels of 50,000 or even significantly more, may be directly connected to the ongoing Russians' attempts to increase the total number of their personnel. Another question is how capable they are right now of actually increasing these numbers. I have my doubts, considering that the Putin regime still cannot find a factor or a reason strong enough to consolidate Russian society to such an extent that they could carry out a larger scale mobilization, bigger than what they are doing now, without resistance or internal conflicts within the dictatorship itself. Therefore, when we assess the numbers of Russian soldiers killed, we should also consider those numbers who have not joined the Russian army, but are desperately needed by the Russian command in order to fulfill even the promised plans and tasks on the ground that we mentioned.
Understood. Mr. Ivan, thank you. Military expert Ivan Timochko was with us.